there is a crisis when it comes to public confidence. Let's listen to them, give them the powers they need, and just stop messing around. That's a reasonable position to take at this stage, isn't it?
Well, what I would say is I totally agree with you that the confidence in the police service is at an all-time low.
So why are you fighting a solution to that?
What I'm saying is that these regulations that are currently in place are fit for purpose should our senior officers and our police forces actually deal with the problem at the very start. Rather than looking at the outcomes, let's deal with the problem at the start of the process. Let's investigate our officers. Let's get the vetting correct. Let's act swiftly and proportionately on any report that comes in, a complaint or any information that comes in for improper behaviour of our police officers, and let's deal with them swiftly. And part of that problem is that it's
being done then?
Far too long.
But why isn't it being done?
Lack of investment, I would say.
Well, that's not a lack of investment, is it? That's a collusion, if you ask me. I think a lot of people listening to this are going to think this is about police officers traditionally covering for each other and refusing to look at the warning signs. We know very well, don't we, that there's been WhatsApp message group after WhatsApp message group revealed to the public now with absolutely abominable messages being passed from one police officer to another. And this is entirely about the police failing to act at the most basic level in a professional way.
Absolutely. And that's the failure of leadership.
Or is it a failure of culture and individual police officers just not acting well? Because I can tell you what.
So many integral parts. So many integral parts. But what we have to have is strong leadership at the start of this process. The moment a police officer joins the service, we should be vetted on a regular basis. We should have proper professional development, proper management to curtail all of these abilities to actually do wrong before it's too late.
Understood. I understand what you're saying. You're saying there needs to be root and branch reform of how complaints are dealt with. In the meantime, would you, if this wasn't a permanent change, would you support it if it was a temporary one? Because you seem to accept, if I've understood you correctly, that the system with the independent lawyer is not working because you acknowledge the figures that I've just read you from the Home Office. Would you at least agree to chief constables being able to have, at its most basic, the right to get rid of police officers who've been found guilty of gross misconduct? This isn't petty stuff, this is gross misconduct, at least for a temporary basis.
No, I would say that every single case, until they can actually bring the right cases,
But they are bringing the right cases. Over 200 officers were found last year guilty of gross misconduct, and more than half of them were allowed to retire or leave the service. It's nothing to do with whether the right cases are coming forward in front of the panel. The fact of the matter is, when they do get there and a police officer is found guilty, they're allowed to just disappear, aren't they? On a golden pension.
Each case should be based on its own merits. And those sanctions that are delivered to those officers are based on those merits, the mitigation and the full information that's there. Would I accept that we could look at this as a temporary basis? No. What I would love to see is the very start of the process being sorted out, and corrupt officers that have no position in the police service rooted out quickly, swiftly, robustly.
I just want to go back to the start of the interview. You said that the Police Federation had not described the proposed reform as a kangaroo court. According to the BBC, the Police Federation's national chair, Steve Hartshorn, is the person who described it as, quote, a return to kangaroo courts. And I just want to talk to you about the language that he's used there, because the minute somebody like the national chair of the Police Federation describes this reform as a kangaroo court, it immediately undermines public confidence even further, doesn't it, in the police? It was very unwise language, wasn't it?
I can't comment on what our national chair has said and quoted.
But you're the deputy, aren't you?
I am the deputy, and Steve has his voice, and I have my voice. We have a position as the federation, and our position as the federation is that we do not agree that every single officer should be sacked if they are found guilty of gross misconduct. We feel that every case is based on its own merits. The kangaroo court, and I'm speaking for Steve here, is the perception that was there from the public before these regulations were actually brought in. It's like for like, but on a full circle procedure.
Understood. Before I let you go, could you just describe to us what a gross misconduct charge is? If a police officer is accused of gross misconduct, what are the kind of things they might have done?
It could be a whole host. It's anything so serious. So anything from sexual violence, violence of any nature, theft, anything that is so serious. You generally find that an officer will face gross misconduct if they have had to go through the criminal courts. So they will go through the criminal courts and then they will be faced with the gross misconduct. Now, ordinarily, what will happen if there is unrefutable evidence against the officer, the chief officer, the chief constable, has the ability to fast track that officer within 14 days of the conviction to get rid of them.
Given what you've described, which is a police officer who's gone through criminal proceedings, who may have been found guilty of sexual violence, you can understand, can't you, why my listeners might just be thinking that your objections to that officer being dismissed automatically from the police service, your objection is essentially farcical.
My objection is that we have to have due process.
But you've had due process because they've gone through the criminal courts, which will be of a higher standard, evidentially, than professional proceedings.
Absolutely. But these are the regulations.
If you agree with that, why don't you think that they should be sacked immediately from the police force then? These are people that are supposed to be upholding the law, not breaking it.
Absolutely. I would expect.
So why should they be allowed to keep their jobs, Tiffany? I'm completely confused.
Because not all of those cases have gone through the criminal process.
But once they have been found guilty, they should be automatically dismissed, shouldn't they?
If they've gone through the criminal process and the mitigation is such that the officer can't move left or right, then yes, they should be sacked.
Understood.
I'm not here to defend the undefendable.